You are listening to another No Fair Remembering Stuff, the Tuesday edition of the Professional Left Podcast, and available wherever you get your podcasts and at our website, proleftpod.com, where you can also contribute to this podcast. There is a Patreon button at our website, or you can mail us a letter and or contribution at The Professional Left Podcast, P.O. Box 9133, Springfield, Illinois, 62791.
And it's not safe for work.
We are recording this on Labor Day, when all of the podcasts in the universe are down at the old fishing hole, relaxing and enjoying the last days of summer. So we're going to keep this kind of abbreviated, since we would also like to go down to the old podcast fishing hole before Olbermann and the Pod Save kids drink all the beer and eat all the brats.
Well, I got to say, our pal Hal Sparks was on live this morning.
Yes, that's true.
So he put in the work.
He puts in the work. He understands the assignment. He puts in the work.
Right.
But
we are recording on Labor Day for various scheduling reasons, and so glad to be here.
Yes, indeed. And you know, rain or shine, derecho will put us off our feed, but other than that, we're usually here.
We do need electricity to podcast.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Well, we needed to talk to each other. We kind of need the internet too. I mean, I could get a generator and we could run our little laptops off that, huddle around a fire, but that seems like excessive. We'll just go to the library next time. Yeah. And tell everybody, shut up, we're podcasting. Hey, everybody, shut up, we're podcasting at the library. But today we're going to focus on a small, overheard sort of conversation between two other podcasters who are kicking around this very big idea of consequences.
Consequences. Specifically, what happens with all the things we teach our kids in kindergarten about playing fair, cleaning up your own mess, and saying you're sorry when you're wrong or you hurt somebody? What happens when those things fail at an institutional level? What happens when marketplace capitalism rewards being wrong and lying and punishes being right and telling the truth? What happens when the mob cheers for the biggest, cruelest a-hole and attacks the vulnerable and powerless?
And you may have noticed, fellow listeners and readers of podcasts and blogs, that virtually everything that we are furious about or frustrated about comes from our democratic institutions and our media bowing to the pressure of the mob and the marketplace. Now, we considered including a clip from Henrik Ibsen's 1882 play, An Enemy of the People, to make the point, but we settled instead on a slightly more popular and widely known example.
Mr. Vaughn, what we are dealing with here is a perfect engine, an eating machine. It's really a miracle of evolution. All this machine does is swim and eat and make little sharks, and that's all. Now, why don't you take a long, close look at this sign? Those proportions are correct.
Love to prove that, wouldn't you? Get your name into the National Geographic.
Larry, if we make an effort today, we might be able to save August.
August? For Christ's sake, tomorrow's the 4th of July, and we will be open for business. It's going to be one of the best summers we've ever had. Now, if you fellas are concerned about the beaches, you do whatever you have to make them safe. But those beaches will be open for this weekend.
Murray Hamilton's character of Mayor Larry Vaughn in Jaws is a perfect distillation of both the failure of government to protect its citizens and the failure of market forces to correct themselves, because Mayor Larry is both the government and the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
Amity Island is run like a business, and the profits from summer tourism trump everything else, from City Hall down to the beach.
Right. It's all one company.
Right. And after a while, as we see it happening right in front of us every day, getting worse and more dangerous every day, we all tend to gravitate towards becoming Hoopers or Brodies, like in Jaws. We are reduced to either laughing cynically and hopelessly at the implacable stupidity of a system that refuses to do what it is supposed to do to protect all of us, and trying to reason with that system, pleading with it, pretty please do what you're supposed to do. Protect democracy. Or if you're a liberal blogger or podcaster, you become a little bit of both, enraged to the point of gallows laughter at institutions that refuse to listen or learn, while trying every day, decade after decade, to instigate change any way we can.
And you know what, Blue Gal? You know what? Let me tell you a thing. Let me tell you a thing about movies. Let me mansplain something to you real quick. In one very interesting respect, Jaws 2, the much maligned Jaws 2, was actually more cynically accurate than the original movie. Because even after a shark nearly destroys the community, a few years later, guess who's mayor still? Larry Vaughn. He's still the mayor and still denying that a second round of shark attacks are, in fact, shark attacks.
So there's no consequences at all.
Consequences. Who cares about consequences? Which is where we pick up on a long conversation between two media people, one of whom you definitely know, crying into each other's beer about the lack of consequences for bad behavior and what it has all led to. We're going to call them Speaker 1 and Speaker 2 until the big reveal at the end. Are you ready, Blue Gal?
I'm ready. Okay, so in this podcast, and it is a podcast, the first speaker introduces the show and also introduces the second speaker. The second speaker then talks about what he used to believe. That it would take something huge and disruptive like slavery or a Great Depression or a World War to shake the foundations of the country to the extent that a large number of Americans would want to overthrow the government. That's what he used to believe.
You know, there was a time in this country, Blue Gal. There was a time.
And he also believed that the country, by almost any metric, is doing pretty well. You can live pretty much as you wish to live. If you're a church-going, conservative, heterosexual, no one is coming for you or trying to take any of that away from you.
Right.
But the speaker admits that he didn't factor in the existence of a, quote, huge media and political and institutional echo chamber, unquote, that now has a vested interest in disrupting the country. There is this constant one-way ratcheting of crazy on the right. Quote, the sense that you get away with and get rewarded for irresponsibility. I think that's very important. You don't pay a price, so you just keep pushing it, and the next generation looks up and says, well, that person did pretty well pushing this. I'm going to go even further and push that, unquote.
Yeah, so it's a generational thing. You know, one generation pushes it as far as it'll go. The next group of people push it further and further and further. Now, the first speaker asked, quote, so I wonder if the part of the answer here isn't the imposition of that C word, consequences, unquote. And then he talks about the sentencing of the Proud Boys and the criminal prosecution of Donald Trump and his many, many, many co-conspirators. The first speaker continues, quote, but part of what my thesis is in all of this is that the culture war is a result of decadence because we all have it so good, right? And that the people don't have to worry about anything. Boat sales, kind of a weird metric, but that's what he chose. Boat sales are at an all-time high. And these are not like blue state New York yacht boat sales. These are middle America. I bought my bass boat type of things. And it's precisely because people aren't really struggling. Things are actually pretty okay right now, and people feel like they have the space to do the stuff because it's all performative. It's all cosplay, and there are no consequences to it. You can say whatever the fuck you want. And people are like, yeah, sure, whatever. You want to say the earth is flat? That's funny. There are a lot of flat earthers who have successful YouTube channels, right? You want to say that you're going to get out your gun and go down to the Michigan State House? Well, that's okay. We need to start having some more, that C word again, consequences for people, and maybe that will help out. But then he adds, I don't know what that means when I say consequences, unquote, which is very, very telling.
Very telling. And you know what? The second speaker loves the idea of imposing consequences on people who say and do terrible, irresponsible stuff.
Yep.
He loves the idea of locking up the people who stormed the Capitol and the people who instigated it. These are just a few snips of his long, impassioned plea for imposing legal and social consequences on people who say and do reckless, irresponsible things from positions of influence. Now listen carefully, because we're about to tell you who this person is, and it's going to blow your mind. Quote, People didn't necessarily dwell on this, but it was important for us mentally that in 1975, the Watergate conspirators, well, Nixon had been pardoned, obviously, but forced from office, and then Haldeman, Ehrlichman, John Mitchell had gone to jail. Look at the last bunch of years that have just been terrible. I mean, the Trump administration, the Hatch Act became a joke. The Hatch Act was a pretty serious piece of legislation to try to make sure that when you elect someone who has a government office, he doesn't use that office for political purposes. Otherwise, it tips the playing field. Otherwise, you're Viktor Orban. But once you don't get in the habit of being serious about either criminal consequences, but also policy consequences of reality, you're on a slippery slope to, I don't know what exactly, but I mean, where being more radical just pays off because you don't pay a price. You don't get marginalized for your radicalism. You don't get excluded from anything, unquote. And then there's this, quote, there needs to be a culture of responsibility, but that culture then has to be a culture that shames and blames, and in some cases actually penalizes irresponsibility. And that we don't have, unquote.
Blue Gal, back in the day, people used to be punished for their irresponsible, reckless, dumb, terrible ideas, but not anymore. Oh, no. So who are these two guys who are warning that unless influential people who are constantly and flagrantly wrong about everything are shunned and marginalized, we're all effing doomed? Well, okay, speaker number one is a guy named Jonathan Last, who works for the Bulwark Podcast Network. And speaker number two, well, take it away, Rachel Maddow from 2014.
Bill Kristol he's become kind of an internet meme. He's become an internet meme that stands for guy who is wrong about everything. If you type Bill Kristol wrong into Google, Google suggests Bill Kristol wrong again, Bill Kristol wrong everything, Bill Kristol always wrong. Very quickly you get to an old Blogspot page advancing a formal theory that Bill Kristol is always wrong. The website is billkristoltheory.blogspot.com.
Yep. The other guy is Bloody Bill Kristol.
Well,
who wants all this responsibility to be enforced and consequences for bad opinions and bad behavior.
This is why I do listen to some of these Never Trump podcasts, because every now and then a chunk of solid gold press latinum of hypocrisy just drops in my lap, and then we're off to the races.
And here it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now that the Weekly Standard is gone, Bill Kristol can be found expounding all over social media at the Bulwark, and as a regular guest on the same liberal cable news network on which Rachel Maddow eviscerated him just 9 short years ago. Boy, that was a better time, Driftglass. I'm just going to say.
There was a time in this country, Blue Gal. There was a day. There was a time.
Oh, man. Of course, we dirty hippies who don't know about no fair remembering stuff have been sounding the alarm about Kristol since the earliest days of blogging. This was Kristol in 2014 chastising Republicans for not being more aggressive in defending Bush's Iraq debacle. Quote, can Republicans do no better than shamefully to emulate Somerset and Obama? I assure you nobody ends up being more war-weary than me. Will no brave leader step forward to honorably awaken us from our unworthy sleep?
Yeah.
Unquote.
Yeah. And at the time, that caused a little bit of a stir. So let me quote extensively from Brother Charlie Pierce, who reacted to this exact quote in his Esquire column. And hey, looky, if you pay very close attention, you'll notice Charlie Pierce believes that there should be consequences for terrible behavior too. He believes in it too. So, quote, blow me, you monstrous, bloodthirsty fraud, you silly, stupid chicken hawk motherfucker who plays army men with the children of people who are so much better than you are, and who would feed innocent children in lands you would never visit into your own personal meat grinder to service your semi-annual martial erection. You and the rest of your cowardly cohort helped prepare the ground for the worst geopolitical mistake the country has made in 30 years. You fought the battle of the green rooms and the think tanks while other people's sons and daughters died for your fantasy of how the world would work if you really were the pimply adolescent Zeus you see when you look in the mirror every morning. The country does not need your lectures anymore. The country does not need your counsel. The country does not need your advice. And as sure as human beings have become dead because of your lectures, and your counsel and your advice, human beings about whom you otherwise care nothing. The country does not need your hectoring, that it has become insufficiently bellicose to fulfill your newest blood-drenched fantasies. Even here, even now, you hide behind the skirts of a woman from Indiana who, while I believe her to be wrong, seems to be genuine in her beliefs. You are unworthy of her intellectual camouflage. You should be driven from polite society, consigned to an ideological Molokai so you can no longer infect the rest of us. People should shun you. You should wear the bell for the rest of your miserable days, unquote. God
Don't
damn.
sugarcoat it, Charlie Pierce. Tell us what you really think.
He writes with a pen of fire.
Yep.
And you know what? As admirable and true as Charlie's column was, I objected to it at the time when others called it a takedown, because you know what? Takedown is an actual noun, which means, quote, the act of being humbled, or, quote, a wrestling move or series of maneuvers that succeeds in bringing a standing opponent down onto the mat. And if decades have taught us anything, it's that nothing is ever going to bring Crystal low or, quote, down onto the mat, unquote. We OG bloggers know this because, you know what? We remember stuff.
Yes, we do.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie Pierce's column reminds us so very much of the very best of the vivisections of Bill Kristol in 2003. 2003 was the year that Bill Kristol's former managing editor, David Brooks, was handed a job for life at the New York Times. It reminds us of all the great working over that we liberals did on Bill Kristol in 2004 and in 2005. 2005 was the year that one of Mr. Kristol's most infamous partners in treason, Paul Wolfowitz, was punished for his lies, arrogance, and murderous incompetence by being given the job of running the World Bank, Driftglass.
Yep, I remember.
Oh, yeah. It reminds us of all the stomping we liberals gave to Bill Kristol in 2006. 2006 was the year Stephen Colbert beat Bill Kristol like a rented mule over his project for a new American century.
I remember that.
He said, how's that project for a new American century going?
And Crystal answered, humana, 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 and tried to change the subject. So,
yep, I'm speechless, he said.
Mm-hmm.
In 2007, Mr. Kristol was given his own column in Time magazine.
Mm-hmm.
In 2008, the year Mr. Kristol lost his Do Nothing, Know Nothing Time magazine featherbed. And I think it was for lazy journalism that he was
bad
fired.
Writing, lazy,
bad
inaccurate
writing,
journalism. Yeah.
Inaccurate. Yep. No fact checking. Mm-hmm. But to balm his hurt fifis, he was given a column in the New York Times.
Yep. For a year. And he sucked at that too.
In 2009, he lost his New York Times gig and had to make do with continuing to be wrong on Fox News. And he was given a regular guest spot, a warm seat on the Sunday shows.
On the Sunday shows, that's right.
And in 2010, 2011.
And in 2012 and in 2013. 2013 was when he finally lost his Fox News gig. So he's out there in the cold. Poor Bill Kristol. He's out there in the cold, and we're holding bake sales for poor Bill Kristol until in 2014, that was when he was given yet another consolation job. This time on ABC News, thanks to the quick thinking of ABC News' youngest executive producer, the, at the time, very nearly post-pubescent Mr. Jonathan Greenberger. Kristol went right on being wildly wrong when he insisted in 2016 that Donald Trump could never be nominated, and then went on to be even more wrong when he tried to run a National Review hack writer no one had ever heard of named David French as a third-party alternative to Trump. By the way, fun fact, that hack National Review writer with very troubling opinions about women and trans people is now a New York Times columnist. So, yay! Everything works. The system works, Blue Gal. And now he has his very own Bulwark Media Company, which actually really is his company because, and I'll bet you didn't know this, the Bulwark is owned by an outfit called the Defending Democracy Together Institute. And the president of the Defending Democracy Together Institute is Bill Kristol.
Did they just take the Project for a New American Century and just put a Sharpie through it?
I
and make it the Defending Democracy Institute? I bet the lawyers that set up the paperwork for that didn't charge extra for the photocopy, right?
You go, photocopy a couple of lines through it, bring over most of the staff.
Yeah.
Who are your favorite neoconservatives? Let's stick them in a room. We'll call it Defending Democracy Together, and we'll start our own little media company, which has grown from nothing to a sprawling, influential media corporation because It is virtually constantly present on MSNBC, which actually represents an in-kind advertising contribution to the Bulwark media company worth tens of millions of dollars every year. And on any given day, you'll find Bill Kristol right there in the house that Rachel Maddow built, yucking it up with all the other Never-Trumpers who have found safe harbor there.
With
now,
their Defending Democracy Together Institute-sponsored Bulwark.
Right.
And are they aware that the acronym for that is DDT?
No. They don't.
Okay,
I mean, if you look it up, you have to really do a little bit of digging to find out that such a thing exists and that actually it owns or owned the Bulwark, that it was the preceding organization that spawned all of this nonsense.
It's probably a 501c4.
Oh, it's a nonprofit, and I believe that
so you can donate money and write it off your taxes, and then spend it on salaries for everybody at the Bulwark.
Sure, because no one in this circle jerk makes a profit on anything, Blue Gal.
Right.
Nobody's ever making any money. They're all doing it out of the goodness of their heart. Now, I would like to stipulate for all the people out there who are seething a little bit, and I know who you are, who I've heard all the scolding about taking a poke at frauds like Kristol, because however bloody and unforgivable their past may be, we liberals all must now set aside all of that because something allies and something democracy. I got it.
Except no one has ever been able to explain to us what vital constituency Bill Kristol represents today.
Yeah. Who are his people? Who's he bringing to the table?
People that are tuning in to go, oh, I really want to watch Bill Kristol.
Oh, Kristol's on.
Let's find out what Bill Kristol thinks about this. Let me check that out.
On MSNBC. Yeah.
On MSNBC. Bill Kristol only exists because he's the son of the godfather of neoconservatism, Irving Kristol. And because in 1995, Rupert Murdoch gave him a big sack of money so that he could launch the Weekly Standard, which always operated at a financial loss and never had a circulation higher than 50,000 people. But it was influential because the people that read it and wrote for it were the power players in the conservative movement and the Republican Party in the DC Beltway. And being the founder and editor-at-large of the Weekly Standard meant that Kristol got invited to spread his terrible opinions everywhere. On the Sunday shows, on the op-ed pages of major American publications. It didn't matter to those other institutions that he was always wrong, because he had real influence. But why is he still here, Driftglass?
Yeah, exactly. Why is he still here?
Why is he still treated with deference and respect by the media?
Okay, so let's break this down. We liberals already come to the table knowing what a monstrous fraud and idiot Bill Kristol is. We already know his long, consequence-free record of being grotesquely wrong. So obviously, we're not the ones who are impressed when we see his face on our TV machine. In fact, we're the ones who turn it off or go watch reruns of Get Smart when he comes on television. Okay, fine. We're off the table. Bill Kristol is just an offense to us, is an offensive presence. But what about Republicans generally? What about those guys? All those reprogrammable meatbags who have sworn eternal fealty to Donald Trump. Are you kidding me? The only group they hate more than immigrants and LGBTQs and minorities, and of course us liberals, are never Trumpers like Bill Kristol. Trump, as you may recall, used to regularly dunk on Bill Kristol on Twitter precisely because of Kristol's long record of being wrong about everything. That same terrible record that the mainstream media refused to acknowledge or ever hold him accountable for. Consequences became a big fat target for Trump precisely because everybody knew it, but no one in the mainstream media would speak of it out loud. So Trump just went in there and said, yeah, this asshole's wrong. He's wrong all the time. Remember how wrong he is? And because he had 1.5 million, 2 million, 3 million followers, like, oh yeah, that's right. This asshole has never been right about anything. So why should I listen to him about Donald Trump? So Kristol has zero influence on anyone on the left because we're already voting the right way. And he has zero influence on anyone on the right because they regard him as a traitor and a joke. And those few thousand, influential conservatives and Republicans who used to subscribe to the Weekly Standard, what become of them? No, forget it. They've already fallen in line behind Trump, or they've gone to ground and have disappeared completely. They have no influence over anything anywhere. So,
well, they might secretly be donating to a Ron DeSantis super PAC or a Tim Scott super PAC. But yeah, in terms of national influence, no, they don't have any.
In terms of defending democracy together, Blue Gal.
No.
Throwing money at Ron DeSantis and Tim Scott ain't the answer.
No.
So write off all those people and what's left. Nobody but the both-siderist mainstream media's favorite go-to chimeras, those imaginary independents and those non-existent centrists who live in a non-existent center.
But Driftglass.
Yes.
That, by strange coincidence, also happens to be the pitch made by virtually every Never-Trumper on virtually every single Bulwark podcast.
You're fucking kidding me, Blue Gal. Really?
No, they really pitch their shows to the imaginary center. Let me give you 3 examples. Charlie Sykes for the Bulwark. We created the Bulwark to provide a platform, because they don't have a platform, for pro-democracy voices on the center right and the center left.
That's right.
For people who are tired of tribalism.
Oh, I love tribalism. I love that word so very much.
Mona Charen advertises her Beg to Differ podcast as the Bulwark's weekly roundtable discussion featuring civil conversation across the political spectrum, Driftglass.
Really? The whole spectrum? The whole thing?
She says, we range from center left to center right.
Jesus. Yeah, okay.
Michael Steele's podcast, last one, promises center left to center right discussions. You know who it's for, Driftglass? For people who are sick of all the tribalism.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus. It really is. It's just a replicating virus all across.
It is. And on and on and on, because in the media, especially the Bulwark media, the rule continues to be, we want accountability and consequences for everyone. For thee, but not for me.
For everyone but us. We'd really like the hammer to come down hard. And we really like the hammer
since 2017, Driftglass.
Yeah, let's just say 2017. But of course, as people have trickled in, like Chris Christie and, other people like that, it's like, well, let's not be too hard on Chris Christie. You mean the guy you were swearing about, you would never, ever touch him with a barge pole. Now he's useful. Now we can. And again, you got to wonder, to whom are these people speaking? And it's this imaginary center and the imaginary set, which the mainstream media loves. The whole horse race universe, the whole
exactly. I think that's the golden word there, horse race. Yep.
So how do these people survive? And this is something that we talked about extensively during our prep for this. And it's because of a kind of economy that neither you or I understand. We acknowledge it exists. We can see it working. But something about our brains, maybe it's being, I don't know, Aspie.
Yeah.
We just don't understand the economy of influence and clout, of favors and favors owed. And yet I'm a big Godfather fan. And the whole, the beginning of the movie and near the end of the movie are based on favors. You come to the Godfather and you ask for a favor. And he grants you your favor, but he may turn around and ask you for something in return later down the road. And that's what binds them together. It is not competence. It's not qualifications. It's not savvy. It's not their intellectual heft. It's, I did favors for you, and now you owe me those favors.
Right.
And if you don't fulfill our unspoken contract, I will let it be known that you welched on your favors, and now you will be put out of the charmed circle. So when Bill Kristol was at the Weekly Standard, he did a whole lot of favors and promoted a whole lot of people who are now in positions of influence. And those people all fucking owe him. So when he gets in trouble, he blows in a call to Time Magazine, and Time Magazine gives him a contract for a year. And the New York Times gives him a contract for a year. And ABC News gives him a contract for however long he wants it. And that universe of favors given and received used to include the entire conservative media. But now that's gone. There is nobody on the Fox or to the right of Fox who wants anything to do with Bill Kristol. We've nullified those contracts. So the only people he can rely on to continue to give him stuff in exchange for what he has done for them in the past are MSNBC, cable news, and the liberal media, and the people who've been implanted there, like Joe Scarborough and Nicole Wallace and so forth.
Yep. I'm wondering too, Driftglass, because so much of what we remember about Bill Kristol is the one thing that the mainstream media absolutely does not want to remember, which is the Iraq War.
Yeah.
And their complicity in that, in pimping the Iraq War for ratings, is something they definitely want to forget. did not think at the time that anyone would ever forget that we were lied into war by Republicans.
No, I thought that's forever, right?
That's forever. But it's not. No. And isn't it ironic in a way that Donald Trump was the ultimate Bush off machine?
He was.
So
he was the one who said to all the people who supported George Bush for 8 years and went down with the ship, Bush lied to you. You're going to elect Jeb Bush, that asshole? You want another Bush in the White House? Don't you remember the Iraq War?
He didn't keep you safe. Right.
And all that massive lying and denial and ass covering that the mainstream media did for people like Bill Kristol and vice versa came back to haunt them, because the one thing Donald Trump got right was the brokenness and corruption and complicity of the mainstream media. So when he told his people, they're the enemy of the state, they're the enemy of you, they're out to get you, they lie to you all the time, he had a whole lot of ammunition to back that shit up. Now, the fact that he is a fascist and hates the idea of a free press, period, and that these people willingly walked into pens, holding pens in his rallies where his people could mock them and throw shit at them, that's on them. But it is, in a sense, like a bizarro version of It's a Wonderful Life, right? It's like, Bill Kristol needs help. I put the word around town. Bill Kristol's in trouble. He needs our help. And all around town, all the assholes that have ever been favored by him or printed by him or promoted by him, including his friend David Brooks, who used his column to promote very specific conservative intellectual leaders who all turned out to be, bullshit. But they all owe them. So when the time comes to pay it back, all he has to do is put out the call, and he's set for life. He'll never miss a meal. And if you want to understand how the system works, don't read a book on journalism. Go watch The Sweet Smell of Success with Burt Reynolds and Tony Curtis.
Yeah.
It is about a glorified gossip columnist who can make or break people's careers based on what he writes in their column. And the way that people suck up to him and pander to him and throw women at him, and he can destroy you, he can destroy your career, or he can turn your shitty Broadway play into a hit with one paragraph in his column. Right. That's the economy in which Bill Kristol was born, in which he trades, and which he has now saved him from a well-deserved oblivion and contempt. He should be on the same list as below Neville Chamberlain.
Right.
That's how people
right.
But suddenly the bigger threat came along that Bill Kristol helped create Donald Trump. And now he's like, well, we can't hold Bill Kristol responsible for anything because he says mean things about Trump. So let's all just pretend that didn't happen. And sometime in the far future, this will all be taken care of and undone and accounted for. No, it won't.
No, it won't. And as a coda to this episode, Driftglass, I'd like to read 4 paragraphs from my blog from 2010. Now, this is not related specifically to Bill Kristol, but it is related to the economy in which Bill Kristol floats. Do you mind if I do this?
Of course not, because we're remembering stuff on this podcast.
It's remembering stuff, and this is a quote that I put in my blog. It's from Washington Life magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And, Washington Life magazine is all about Washington, D.C. society and parties.
Right. This is 2010, right?
This is 2010. So many people came to Juliana Glover's house to help inaugurate the Daily Caller that partygoers looking to find the website's founder, Tucker Carlson, had to call him on their cell phones. The Daily Caller went live on January 11th, adding yet another must-read for news junkies who should probably file a sleep deprivation class action suit against Matt Drudge. After all, his Drudge report pretty much started the phenomenon. Has Tucker finally hit his stride? We hope so. He's hosted or been a guest on all the major cable networks with multiple writing positions along the way.
Yeah.
The consensus, according to radio talk show host Bill Press, if anybody can cut through, thrive, and survive, it's Tucker. He's always fresh and different. Guests included media stalwarts Ann Compton and Christopher Hitchens, as well as hip young reporters Emily Heil of Roll Call and Kiki Ryan of Politico. The big surprise of the night, Plamegate scandal figure I. Lewis Scooter Libby, circulating mostly unrecognized in the supposedly politically savvy crowd.
Oh, God. Oh, God. Yep.
Yeah, so that's 2010. And it's that party circuit and, Tucker writing to Hunter Biden to get his kid into school.
Right.
Get my kid into school or keep my kid out of jail.
Right.
Get me a job. Get my intern a new job.
Mm-hmm.
They're laying off at my institution. Find my friends jobs.
Right. Wingnut welfare. Find
welfare.
Find my friend a place, an internship, anything. That happened to David Frum when he got fired from the American Enterprise Institute.
Yep.
He suddenly has to, and he's a wealthy man, but now he's got no health insurance. And his friend Andrew Sullivan hooks him up at, I believe, the Huffington Post. Or Salon. I think it was Huffington Post. Enough to get him through. But it is that.
Mark Halperin, same thing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Right? Mark Halperin. How did Ben Dominic not die in obscurity? Well, his friend Chris Hayes and his friend Ezra Klein used their programs on MSNBC to revive his career, bring him, up from the sewer and give him a place to talk on their show and talk about how he's my favorite. He's my favorite guy. This is one of my favorite conservatives. And it is this economy of favors owed, favors done, and who does who for what. And those phone calls made between people of influence that you and I never see, that we never have access to, and that we're never going to be a part of. We never benefit from any of that.
Right.
And so we're all left scratching our head wondering, how the hell did Rick Wilson go from, go from the number one leading racist bomb throwing asshole who in 2016 was all in favor of stealing a Supreme Court seat? How did that asshole get to be a cable news celebrity and have a multi-million-dollar media company like overnight? Well, one of the stepping stones was Anna Marie Cox, who used to have a podcast. And guess where Rick Wilson went? He went to talk to his very good friend Anna Marie, and she had him on, once a month. He used to practice the dark arts, but now he's a good guy. We should listen to him. And it's that kind of enabling middleman who gives you credibility in the liberal universe. It's how Glenn Beck got to be written up on the New York Times as a never-Trumper. Because, Anna Marie Cox wrote a column saying, and it's that kind of thing that drives me mad, because you can see what's happening. You can see, I was at a party with her and I held her head while she was puking and listened to her bitch about her boyfriend or girlfriend, listened to him do this and that. And now 3 years later, when I'm in the fucking sewer, I blow in a call saying, hey, how about having me on a guest on your podcast? Sure. It's favors traded and it's favors given, and that's the currency. And I saw this, I'll just use my code to this podcast, at the city of Chicago, where there still is an entire economy based on clout. Based on proximity to the mayor. Your job title didn't really matter. It was literally how physically close you were to the fifth floor. If you were across town, you mattered less than if you lived on the fifth floor. But there was a whole universe of people who were advancing their careers and going in the media and talking about what they want and their next job, and how I'm running the CTA now and I've always wanted to do that, and I'm board of education. That's the job I've always wanted. And all these people had this network of everyone climbs the pyramid together because they all have clout with Daley, because Daley can make or break them. Then Daley announces his resignation. And that entire that version of that currency, all of the value of those coins evaporated overnight, because it wasn't about competence. It wasn't about ability. It was about proximity to a particular person. And once that person stopped being able to mint coins.
Yeah, it is. It's NFTs, isn't it? It really is. It's the belief system that being somebody's friend is going to be worth something down the road. Yeah.
And suddenly the chief of staff who wanted this and wanted that and had been had on 3 different jobs, Ron Huberman, who was finally at the Board of Education where he always wanted to be his whole life, announces his resignation from the blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And they're all gone. They're all dispersed. And everyone inside the system knew this was how it works. Everyone inside the system knew proximity to power is how you get anywhere, not whether you're good, not whether you're competent, not whether you can deliver. It's whether or not you're there when the boss is drunk with a hooker at 2 a.m. and needs someone to cover it up. That's what pays the bills. And that's what you can call on 6 years from now when you need a break. And I've seen that happen way too often for me to believe that isn't exactly how the media operates and why the media is so goddamn corrupt. Anyway.
Hey, we're going to call on our listeners now. Don't forget, we really need more Patreons to make this podcast fly. So if you can afford to support us in that way, $5 a month, buy us a coffee that way, visit our Patreon. at patreon.com/proleftpod. And thank you for that. See you next time.
See you next time.
The Professional Left Podcast No Fair Remembering Stuff Tuesday edition is produced under a Creative Commons license. Copyright 2022-23, DGBG Productions.